911, what is your emergency?
Please send someone. It's Dianna, the lion. Oh my god, he's got her. She's not moving. Please, I need help at Cat Haven. The lion's loose.
Sir, are you there? Can you confirm the location and the situation?
He's standing over her. Just standing there. I can't get to her. He won't move. Please, you have to do something. He killed her.
Some people chase a dream. They live and breathe it. They dedicate their entire life to it, no matter the cost, no matter the danger. For 24-year-old Dianna Hanson, that dream was a world of roaring predators, of sharp claws and powerful muscles. It was the world of big cats. She wasn't just a fan, she was a true believer. A woman so captivated by these magnificent creatures that she chose to spend her days surrounded by them, to work with them, to protect them. She saw them not as killers, but as misunderstood giants. A part of her believed they were just big, furry cats. And maybe, just maybe, she thought that if she showed them enough love and trust, they would return it. That belief, that beautiful naive faith in the gentle nature of a beast, would lead her to a tragic end. Because no matter how much you love a lion, no matter how long you've cared for it, a lion is still a lion. It doesn't love back. It doesn't forgive. And on one fateful day in March, that brutal truth was laid bare in a shocking, terrifying moment that proved some lines should never be crossed. A line between man and beast. A line between predator and prey. A line that Dianna Hanson trusted she could step over, but one that the 5-year-old African lion named Cous Cous had no intention of letting her cross back. Dianna Hanson's story wasn't born in a cage. It started like so many others in a quiet suburban town. She grew up with a deep, almost spiritual connection to animals. While other kids were playing with dolls or video games, Dianna was reading books about wildlife, watching documentaries, and drawing sketches of tigers and leopards. This wasn't just a childhood phase, it was an obsession that defined her. She wasn't just passionate, she was driven. Her friends remember her as the one who would stand up for any creature, big or small. She was the one who rescued stray cats, the one who convinced her parents to let her volunteer at a local animal shelter. It was an all-consuming love. This passion led her to pursue a degree in a field where she could be close to the animals she adored. Her journey took her to exotic locations, but her heart always belonged to the great cats. The bigger, the better. She saw something in their raw power and grace, a wildness she felt was missing in the modern world. She saw them as majestic, and she wanted to be a part of their lives, to help them, to understand them. Her ultimate goal was to work with big cats in a professional capacity, to dedicate her life to their conservation and care. When she heard about Cat Haven, a private sanctuary in California dedicated to the care and preservation of wild felines, it was like a dream come true. Nestled in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, east of Fresno, Cat Haven wasn't a zoo. It was a home for animals that couldn't be released back into the wild. It was a place where a young, hopeful intern could get up close and personal with the very creatures she had only ever seen on screens. To Dianna, this was it. This was her calling. She packed her bags, left her old life behind, and moved to a remote part of California, ready to begin what she believed would be the most fulfilling chapter of her life. She took on a demanding, unpaid internship, living in a small cabin on the property. Her days filled with the care and feeding of lions, tigers, and cheetahs. The work was grueling, often dangerous, but for Dianna, it wasn't work. It was a privilege. It was her dream. She had confided in family and friends that she had never been happier. She was living her purpose. Little did she know that this dream was about to become a nightmare. The animal at the center of this tragedy was a 5-year-old African lion named Cous Cous. But he wasn't just any lion. Cous Cous had been raised at Cat Haven since he was a cub. He was a product of the sanctuary's breeding program, a resident from birth. He was big, weighing in at over 400 pounds, a powerful and imposing male with a golden mane and a territorial roar that echoed through the hills. But to the staff, and particularly to Dianna, he was more than a wild beast. He was a familiar face, a part of the family. He was their resident lion. He had a reputation for being somewhat playful, a characteristic that often lulled people into a false sense of security. He would swat at toys, roll around in the sun, and vocalize with the keepers. He was an animal that, on the surface, appeared comfortable and content in his environment. But beneath the facade of a well-cared-for animal lay a primal instinct, a hunger and a raw power that could be triggered at a moment's notice. An animal's instinct is not something that can be trained away. It's a part of their DNA. And while Cous Cous had spent his entire life in captivity, he had never forgotten what he was. He was a predator, a hunter, a wild animal at his core. And the handlers, the keepers, they knew this. They were trained to respect this. They were supposed to operate under the assumption that every single interaction, no matter how routine, was a life or death situation. Every gate, every lock, every moment of inattention could be the difference between life and a horrifying, violent death. The rules at Cat Haven were clear. You do not enter an enclosure with a lion, ever. The animals were to be secured in a separate holding area before a keeper went in to clean or perform maintenance. This was a non-negotiable protocol, a basic safety measure drilled into every single staff member and intern. It was the first rule of working with apex predators. But rules are often tested, bent, or in this case, completely broken. It's impossible to know exactly what went wrong in the moments leading up to the attack. Was it a moment of complacency, a lapse in judgment? Was Dianna tired, distracted, or simply lulled into a sense of false security? Reports from the subsequent investigation would suggest a critical failure of protocol. The large enclosure was being cleaned, and Cous Cous was supposed to be securely locked in his smaller holding cage, a space designed to keep him safely contained. But something went terribly wrong. The gate to the holding cage, a heavy steel barrier designed to keep 400 pounds of muscle contained, was found to be unlocked. It wasn't fully open, but it was unlatched, just enough for the powerful lion to use his paw to lift it and push his way out. It was a mistake, an oversight, a fatal error that would cost Dianna her life. This wasn't the first time that concerns had been raised about safety at the facility. Reports would later surface from former employees and volunteers who had witnessed what they considered to be lax safety standards and dangerous conditions. One former keeper would tell investigators that the rules were often ignored, that staff would become overly comfortable with the animals, treating them more like pets than wild beasts. The owner of the sanctuary, Dale Anderson, maintained that all proper procedures were in place, but the truth, as it would be revealed, was far more grim. The investigation found that there was no written manual for the interns, no formal safety checklist. It was a system built on trust and assumption, a system where the smallest mistake could lead to catastrophe, a system that failed Dianna Hanson. The day was Wednesday, March 6, 2013. The California sun was warm, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. It was a seemingly perfect day, a day that should have ended with Dianna returning to her cabin, tired but fulfilled. She was in the lion's enclosure performing a routine cleaning task. The ground was dirt and brush, the air thick with the smell of the wild, of hay, and of the big cats. Her movements were routine, muscle memory taking over as she went about her work. She was in her element, a feeling of peacefulness settling over her. She believed Cous Cous was where he was supposed to be, locked away and safe. The moments before the attack were silent, a terrifying prelude to a violent end. Dianna was likely bent over, focused on her work, her back to the open gate. She wouldn't have heard the soft, padded footfalls. She wouldn't have heard the quiet shift of the lion's weight. She wouldn't have known he was there until it was too late. He came up behind her, silent and deadly, the instinct to hunt overwhelming any memory of past interactions. There was no growl, no roar, just a single, swift motion. A swipe of his massive paw, a blow with enough force to shatter bone. A sound that was a sickening crack followed by silence. The medical examiner would later confirm that Dianna's neck was broken instantly. She wouldn't have suffered, a small mercy in a brutal situation. The world went from bright sunlight and the smell of hay to absolute darkness in a single, terrifying second. She was a human, a person filled with hopes and dreams. But in that moment, she was nothing more than prey. And Cous Cous, the lion she had cared for, the animal she had come to love, was just being a lion. The primal instinct to hunt, to dominate, had taken over. The subsequent bites and scratches found on her body were not from a struggle, but from the lion's natural post-mortem behavior, a brutal, horrifying confirmation of the animal's predatory nature. The first person to discover the horror was a fellow employee. A phone call to Dianna had gone unanswered, which was unusual. The coworker went to check on her, the feeling of dread growing in his stomach with every passing second. He arrived at the enclosure, and what he saw was a scene of pure terror. Dianna was on the ground, lifeless, and standing over her, like a triumphant sentinel, was Cous Cous. The lion was calm, almost casual, as if he was simply guarding his prize. The coworker immediately backed away, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. The 911 call was frantic, filled with static and terror. He couldn't go in. The lion was blocking the way. He couldn't risk his own life. The minutes felt like hours as he waited for help, watching the unmoving tableau of predator and prey. When sheriff's deputies arrived, they found the same horrifying scene. A young woman's body, a massive lion standing over her, its gaze fixed and unyielding. They tried everything they could to get the lion away from the body. They shouted. They honked their horns. They used non-lethal deterrents. Nothing worked. Cous Cous wouldn't budge. He was possessive, protective of his kill, with no other option, and with the goal of safely reaching Dianna's body to confirm her status and provide aid, the deputies made the heartbreaking decision. They raised their rifles and fired. The roar of the shots was deafening, echoing through the quiet hills. Cous Cous, the lion that had been a part of Cat Haven for 5 years, collapsed. He was dead. It was a tragic, necessary end to an even more tragic day. The officers were then able to approach the body, confirming what they already knew. Dianna was gone. The scene was secured, and the long, grim work of investigation began. Paramedics were on site, but their role was to simply confirm the time of death and prepare the body for transport. A promising life had been cut short in a matter of seconds, and the aftermath would be felt for years to come. The news of Dianna Hanson's death spread like wildfire. It was a story that gripped the nation. A young woman, an animal lover, killed by the very creature she devoted her life to. The headlines were sensational, filled with graphic details and speculation. The public reaction was a mix of shock, grief, and outrage. How could this happen at a supposed sanctuary? Were the owners negligent? Was it an accident? The local news stations were swamped with calls, and reporters descended on the remote Cat Haven property, creating a media frenzy. The subsequent investigation was extensive and detailed. The Fresno County coroner's report was clear and chilling. Dianna's cause of death was a broken neck, consistent with a powerful blow from the lion. The post-mortem bites were a horrifying detail that only added to the tragedy. Officials from Cal-OSHA, the California agency responsible for workplace safety, launched a full-scale probe into Cat Haven's procedures. They found that the facility had not maintained a formal injury and illness prevention program, a requirement for any business in California. They also found that the safety protocols were not being strictly followed, and that the fatal error, the unlatched gate, was a direct result of a lack of proper supervision and training. The owner of the sanctuary, Dale Anderson, was devastated. He maintained that Dianna was a diligent employee, and that the incident was a tragic, unforeseen accident. He insisted that she had been trained, and that all protocols were in place. But the evidence told a different story. The investigation would reveal that Cat Haven was a place run on a shoestring budget, a place where dedicated volunteers and interns were often put in dangerous situations without the proper safety net. The sanctuary would be issued a heavy fine, and its reputation would be forever tarnished. The legal consequences were swift, but the public outcry was even more powerful. Animal welfare organizations and activists used Dianna's death as a rallying cry, arguing that private ownership of big cats was inherently dangerous and should be banned. Protests were held, and the debate over the ethics of keeping these animals in captivity raged on. For her family, the public spectacle was just noise. They were left with an unimaginable void, a daughter who had followed her dreams only to have them end in a way they could have never predicted. They tried to find peace in the fact that she was doing what she loved, but that small comfort did little to ease the pain of her loss. Dianna Hanson's story is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no matter how much we love and admire the wild, we must never forget its nature. We build enclosures, we create sanctuaries, we give them names and a false sense of security. We convince ourselves that these magnificent creatures are something they are not. We humanize them. We project our own emotions onto them. We believe that a lifetime of care can somehow erase millions of years of evolution. But it can't. The wild is always lurking, just beneath the surface, waiting for a single moment of vulnerability, for a single unlatched gate. Dianna died, living her dream. But in her final moments, she came face to face with a terrible truth. The lion she had so loved and trusted was not a gentle giant. He was a predator. And she, for a fleeting moment, was simply prey. She shouldn't have trusted the lion. And in the silence of that final, terrifying second, she probably learned why. Additional expansion for length. The ripple effects of Diana's death were not contained to the small private world of Cat Haven. The incident became a national talking point, fueling an already heated debate about the regulation of exotic animal ownership. PETA. The Humane Society and other animal rights groups were quick to seize on the tragedy as proof of their long-held belief that big cats should never be kept in private hands, regardless of the owner's intentions or the facility's sanctuary status. They pointed to the countless incidents across the country where private owners or ill-equipped facilities had resulted in attacks, escapes, and the death of both humans and animals. They held press conferences, organized online petitions, and launched a social media campaign to bring awareness to the issue. Justice for Dianna became a trending hashtag, a memorial and a rallying cry all at once. The media dug deeper into the history of Cat Haven and its owner, Dale Anderson. They discovered that while Anderson was passionate about his work, the facility operated with a degree of informality that would prove to be a fatal flaw. The Kalosha report wasn't just a list of violations, it was a damning indictment of a system built on faith rather than rigorous protocol. The report noted that there were no clear lines of command, no formal training logs, and a reliance on verbal instructions rather than a comprehensive, written safety manual. Interns like Dianna were expected to learn on the job, observing and mirroring the actions of the more experienced staff. In the world of big cats, where a single mistake can be deadly, this kind of informal training was a recipe for disaster. The investigation uncovered a specific, haunting detail, a report of a prior incident involving Cous Cous. A former employee recalled a moment a few years earlier where the lion had shown uncharacteristic aggression toward a keeper, swatting at the bars of his cage and snarling. The incident was dismissed at the time as a bad mood, a momentary lapse, but in retrospect, it was a warning sign that went unheeded. There were other whispers too, tales of near misses, of gates not quite latching, of a general creeping sense of complacency among the staff who, day after day, saw these dangerous animals and thought of them as just the big cats. The grief of Diana's family was compounded by the media circus. They gave a few short interviews, speaking of their beautiful, passionate daughter who was living her dream. They tried to convey the depth of her love for these animals, to explain that she wasn't reckless, just incredibly dedicated. But their words were often lost in the noise of the headlines, the debates, and the legal proceedings. The world saw a victim, a symbol in a larger fight. They saw a story. But her parents saw their daughter. They saw the little girl who loved animals, who drew pictures of lions, and who was now gone forever. The weight of knowing that she died so violently, and in a place she considered a sanctuary, was a torment they would live with for the rest of their lives. For the residents of Dunlap, a small tight-knit community, the incident was a shocking and surreal event. Cat Haven was a local landmark, a place of pride for many. The owners were well known and respected. The attack shattered that image of a quiet, rural haven. The silence of the surrounding mountains, once a source of peace, now held the echoes of a shot and a tragedy. The community was divided. Some defended Dale Anderson, believing him to be a good man who was simply a victim of a terrible accident. Others questioned how he could have allowed a young intern to be in such a dangerous situation. It was a wound that would not heal easily. The final official report from the investigation was released months later, a thick document filled with technical jargon and a grim conclusion. The proximate cause of death was attributed to the unlatched gate. The underlying cause was a failure to establish and implement an effective injury and illness prevention program. The report cited multiple examples of procedural failures, including inadequate training and a lack of clear supervision. It stated that Dianna, as an intern, was not properly prepared for the risks of her work. The report was not just a legal document. It was a testament to how an accumulation of small failures, of missed steps and overlooked warnings, could culminate in a monumental tragedy. The legal fallout was far from over. Dianna's family, in their grief and their search for answers, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the sanctuary. The suit was not just for monetary damages, it was a quest for accountability. They wanted to ensure that no other family would have to experience this kind of loss. The lawsuit would drag on for years with depositions, hearings, and a constant revisiting of the most painful day of their lives. Every legal motion, every document filed, was a new reminder of the terrible cost of that single, unlatched gate. The legacy of Dianna Hanson is a complex one. She is remembered by those who loved her as a bright, passionate young woman who followed her heart. In the world of animal rights and conservation, she is a symbol, a martyr in the ongoing battle against the private ownership of big cats. But in the final, quiet moments before the attack, none of that mattered. There was no cause, no debate, no lawsuit. There was just a woman, alone in a lion's enclosure, and an animal whose natural instincts had, in an instant, overwhelmed a lifetime of captivity. The only truth was the unforgiving reality of the wild. The sun that day was just a sun. The air was just air. But the scent of a human bent over and vulnerable was an ancient signal, a trigger that had been waiting for just such a moment. The soft, dusty ground of the enclosure was a hunting field. The metal gate, a failed barrier. And Cous Cous, a creature of immense power and primal instinct, saw not a caregiver, but something else entirely. He saw his next meal. The last sound Dianna Hanson heard was not a roar of triumph, but the silent, deadly confirmation that some things cannot be tamed. And as the world went dark, the lion stood over her, a chilling tableau of nature's final, brutal lesson. It was a moment that could have been avoided, a life that should not have been lost, all because a gate was left unlatched.